Welcome to Thoughts and Theories. When was the last time you heard news about Sudan? Probably not recently, and yet right now, more than 25 million people there are struggling to find food, shelter, or even clean water. Entire cities have been destroyed. Millions have fled their homes. Children are starving, and the world, quite simply, has turned away. This is the story of Sudan's forgotten people. A story not just about war, but about indifference. About what happens when human suffering becomes invisible. Let's take a closer analytical look at what's happening, why it matters, and what it says about us as a global society. The conflict in Sudan didn't start from nowhere. It began in April 2023, when two military forces, the Sudanese Armed Forces and a powerful paramilitary group called the Rapid Support Forces, turned their guns on each other. Both groups had once been allies. Together they had removed Sudan's longtime dictator, Omar al-Bashir, who ruled for nearly 30 years. But instead of leading to democracy, their rivalry became a battle for control, over power, resources, and territory. Now, you might think this is just another civil war in a distant country, but that would be a mistake, because Sudan isn't an isolated conflict. It sits in the heart of Africa, connecting the Arab world, sub-Saharan Africa, and the Red Sea, a region vital for global trade and stability. And when a country like that collapses, the effects ripple far beyond its borders. To understand how we got here, you have to look deeper than the headlines. Sudan's crisis is built on layers of history, colonial legacies, economic inequality, ethnic tensions, and political betrayal. For decades, elites in Khartoum hoarded wealth and power while rural regions like Darfur were left behind. In the early 2000s, that inequality turned into violence. The government armed militias to crush uprisings in Darfur. Those militias committed horrific atrocities, massacres, rapes, ethnic cleansing. Hundreds of thousands died. The world called it genocide. We said, never again. But the irony is painful, because some of the same forces involved in those atrocities evolved into today as paramilitary RSF. The actors changed uniforms, but the logic of violence remained the same. So when the RSF and the National Army clashed, civilians once again paid the price. Now, let's talk about the human cost, not in abstract numbers but in real terms. The United Nations estimates that more than 10 million people have been displaced, the largest displacement crisis on Earth right now. Around half of Sudan's population faces hunger. Hospitals have been bombed, food markets looted, entire towns wiped off the map. In Darfur, reports describe ethnically targeted killings that echo the horrors of 20 years ago. In Khartoum, a once vibrant city of 5 million, people live without electricity or running water for months at a time. Bodies lie unburied in the streets. Women risk assault just to fetch water. Diseases like cholera are spreading, not because of nature, but because of neglect. And yet, despite all this, Sudan barely makes the news. Why? One reason is timing. The war in Sudan erupted while the world's attention was elsewhere, on Ukraine, Gaza, and countless other crises. International focus is limited, and media space is a competition. The second reason is access. Journalists can't freely report from Sudan. Communication networks have been cut. Aid convoys are blocked or attacked, so the images that move public opinion never reach our screens. And in a digital age, what we don't see, we rarely care about. Third, the global response system itself is stretched thin. Humanitarian agencies depend on donor governments for funding, and those governments often give based on politics, not need. In 2024, the UN asked for $2.7 billion to help Sudan's civilians. Barely half was funded. Compare that to other conflicts receiving massive coverage and you see the difference. This isn't just a tragedy, it's a hierarchy of suffering. Now, from a philosophical and analytical point of view, this raises an uncomfortable question. Why do we respond passionately to some crises and ignore others? Part of it is proximity. When a war happens in Europe or a region tied to global trade, it feels closer to us. Part of it is media coverage. The suffering we see is the suffering we believe exists, and part of it, honestly, is fatigue. There are so many crises that we build emotional walls. We stop caring to protect ourselves. But the result is dangerous, because indifference can be as destructive as violence itself. When the world stops paying attention, warlords act with impunity. Aid agencies lose funding, and suffering deepens in silence. From a logical standpoint, ignoring Sudan is also short-sighted. Conflicts like this never stay contained. They create refugee flows that destabilize neighbors. They disrupt trade routes. They breed resentment and extremism. They destroy generations of education and healthcare, ensuring that even when the guns stop, the poverty continues. Sudan borders 7 countries. Every one of them is already fragile: Chad, South Sudan, Egypt, Eritrea, Ethiopia, the Central African Republic, and Libya. When millions flee across those borders, it strains entire regions. So even if we think Sudan is far away, its collapse could shape the security and economy of half a continent. In simple terms, neglect now guarantees a bigger crisis later. Let's also talk about responsibility. Not moral preaching, but rational responsibility. If we claim to live in a globalized world, if we say we care about human rights and equality, then crises like Sudan test those claims. They show whether those words mean anything or whether they're just slogans we use when convenient. This isn't about religion or divine justice. It's about the simple human logic that suffering anywhere reduces the humanity everywhere. Every child who dies in famine, every family displaced by war, diminishes what we collectively stand for as a civilization that claims to value life. When people in Sudan lose their homes, they don't stop being human. We stop being humane. Some might say, but what can ordinary people do? We can't stop a war. And that's true. No individual can. But awareness matters. Pressure matters. When public attention grows, media coverage expands. When coverage expands, governments act. That's how humanitarian systems work, not from sudden moral awakenings, but from sustained public pressure. And awareness begins with understanding. Understanding that behind the statistics are real people. Teachers, nurses, shopkeepers, who wanted the same ordinary things we all do. Safety, family, hope. There's a woman named Fatima who fled Darfur with her 3 children. Her husband was killed, her village burned. She now lives in a tent in Chad, surviving on a few cups of lentils a day. Her story isn't unique, it's one of millions. When aid groups say they're running out of food, that means people like Fatima are literally skipping meals to keep their children alive. That's what happens when global attention fades. And it's happening right now. From a broader philosophical lens, Sudan's crisis forces us to confront how empathy works. We are wired to care about faces we recognize, languages we understand, cultures we relate to, but global justice demands that we stretch beyond that. If we only value lives that look like ours or appear on our screens, then morality becomes a popularity contest. The question isn't just, why is Sudan suffering, but also, why are we silent? Because silence, history shows, is the soil in which atrocities grow. Let's step back. Every generation faces a moment that tests its moral vision. The Holocaust, Rwanda, Darfur, Syria. Each time, the world says, never again. And each time, it happens again, just somewhere less visible. Sudan is that moment for us now. This isn't about guilt, it's about awareness. It's about asking, how do we measure progress? By technology and wealth, or by how we treat the forgotten? So, what can be done? First, humanitarian access must be restored. That means ceasefires that allow food and medicine to reach civilians. Second, global powers, the US, EU, African Union, Arab League, must treat Sudan not as a background problem but as an urgent moral and strategic priority. Third, citizens like us must amplify awareness, share credible stories, support verified aid groups, refuse to let this crisis disappear. That's not naive optimism. That's the only path forward. Because if the world can respond to crises that trend on social media, it can also respond to the ones that don't. In the end, the story of Sudan's forgotten people is not just about war. It's about what kind of world we are building, one that measures worth by geography, or one that values all human life equally. Every time we turn away from suffering, we normalize it. Every time we say, "It's not our problem," we make it easier for cruelty to survive. And every time we remember, speak, and act, even in small ways, we keep alive that fragile idea that compassion still matters. Sudan is not gone. Its people are not nameless. They are still there, waiting for the world to remember. So maybe that's where we begin, by not forgetting. Because sometimes remembering is the first act of resistance.